We are joined now, Jesse, by Councillor Joe Mihevc, who's councillor for Ward 21 in St. Paul's. He's been a councillor for 19 years, first in the old city of York, and after amalgamation with the city of Toronto. Councillor Mihevc also has a PhD in theology and ethics, and he's here today to talk with us about transit.
Well, let me just say before we get started, if you have any questions or comments for Mr. Mihevc, Councillor Mihevc, please email themondaymouth@gmail.com. We can only take one call at once, but if you email themondaymouth@gmail.com, I'll be happy to read your questions out.
Councillor Mihevc, thank you so much for joining us this evening on CKLN.
Great to be on CKLN. Great radio station.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, Mayor Ford and Premier McGuinty have recently announced $8.4 billion to rebuild the Scarborough Rapid Transit and to finally build the Eglinton LRT. How important is that Eglinton LRT to the residents in your ward, in Ward 27, right in the heart of the city?
Well, the Eglinton line is really, really important for the city as a whole, because in the end, now this will be a 10, 20-year project. It will stretch from one end of the city of Toronto right into the airport. And that will frankly be a great transportation or mobility uniter for all the city of Toronto. But it's important to note how the real deal between the province and the city of Toronto, it really, more than calling it a marriage, I would call it a divorce. Basically, what the Premier's office negotiated and the province negotiated with the mayor was, okay, Mayor Ford, you don't want anything that's above ground because, as he put it at his press conference, it's part of the war on the car, and you can't have streetcars. Even if you widen the road to make room for LRT, light rail vehicles, that's still not good enough. The only good transit is underground transit, according to the mayor.
Gravy
so
train.
What he did was he said, okay, Mr. Ford, you do Shepherd, you figure that out, and you figure out what you want to do on Finch, and Finch then got promptly canceled. Shepherd LRT got promptly canceled. We'll take our $8.4 billion and we'll invest it all along Eglinton, and we'll underground it from Black Creek in the west all the way to Kennedy Subway Station in the east, and then we'll also renovate the SRT, the Scarborough Rapid Transit line, and that will cost us close to $8.4 billion. And you, Mr. Mayor, you worry about funding the subway yourself. That's a $4.2 billion project, and in the meantime, Finch gets canceled. So that was the basic deal that came forth from their negotiations. I think the province was fed up with the mayor and just said, you do your thing, we'll do our thing, we'll focus on SRT and Eglinton. So thankfully, that piece is going forward.
And thankfully, the Eglinton LRT is going forward. But you've mentioned the plan now is to have the entire Eglinton LRT underground. How does that contrast? I know Eglinton was sort of the backbone of that transit city plan that was out there. How does the plan to have the entire thing underground contrast with the transit city plan, and how much more is it going to cost us to put the entire LRT underground?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So before, the way it was going to be, if you start at Jane Street, it was going to be above ground from Jane to Black Creek, then go underground. And the reason why it was going to be above ground there is because Eglinton is very wide there, 6 lanes plus a wide, generous boulevard on each side. So there's lots of room to stay above ground. And then underground at just east of Black Creek. And that underground would have gone all the way to Laird Drive, actually Brent Cliff, where it would have popped out again and been above ground to Kennedy Subway Station. That piece between Brent Cliff, Laird Drive, and the Kennedy Subway Station is now underground. And that piece of work, that shift in monies, will require an additional $2 billion worth of investment. And that's where's that money coming from? It's coming from the cancellation of Shepherd and Finch. So all the people along Finch, they lose. All the people along Shepherd, from one end, Don Mills end, all the way to the far eastern end of Scarborough, they lose. And really, the gain from a public transit point of view to keeping it underground is marginal, if anything. So it's really that piece shouldn't happen. We should be basically saying, you know what, take that $2 billion and let's invested in places where we can get a better bang for the buck.
And Councillor Mihevc, I want to move on to that Shepherd subway as well, but before I do, my understanding is that the new light rail transit line, the LRT line, is actually going to be owned by Metrolinx after completion. Is that going to make any difference practically for me as a TTC user when I go to get on that line as opposed to any other part of the TTC system?
No, it won't mean anything to you as a user. It's really about a way for the province to put it on their books in a way that doesn't increase their debt. So it basically, they will own it, but they will lease it to us for $1 a year, and we will operate it as part of the transit system, the TTC system in the City of Toronto. But it won't cost us anything. It's there for us, and it's an accounting tool that they will technically own the LRT.
And we've talked about the LRT. Let's move on to the rest of the plan, which is $4.2 billion. It's the expansion of the Shepherd subway. However, the city is on the hook under this plan. The province isn't giving any money for the $4.2 billion. That's a billion with a B dollar expansion of the Shepherd subway. And you already mentioned that. Is that number even possible for the city with increased development fees for the increased density along Shepherd? In your opinion, is that number in any way possible?
Well, to my thinking, and my thinking is certainly informed by TTC or public transit planners, by city planners, by developers, I have yet to find someone who's looking at this neutrally and not ideologically, who would say that this is a wise use of dollars and that it is even possible. When you do the math and you consider how much you get from development charges from buildings, let's say you want to develop it that way, you would need a wall of 40-story condos from Don Mills to the Scarborough Town Center, and that wall would have to be 2 or 3 streets north of and south of Shepherd right now. It's just the density would be unbelievable. So then you'd say, okay, where's the rest of the money going to come from? Well, maybe they'll get a gift from the federal government. Let's say they get $1 billion. You'd still need $3 billion. $3 billion is as much as the debt that has come together under David Miller and under Mel Lastman and inherited from the former 7 municipalities. $3 billion is a massive amount of money. So there's only 2 things that can happen. Either this will die, or we will be so indebted that it will be our children and our children's children that will have to pay for this line. And then once it's built, the operating costs will be enormous. Right now, we spend an additional $7 million a year to keep the Shepherd subway going. It is a 4-car train set. Usually you have 6-car train sets, and it runs half as frequently on Shepherd as it does on Yonge and Bloor Danforth. So, and we still have to pay $7 million because the subway trains are half empty. So, yes, maybe in 100 years, maybe in 60, 70 years, the densities will be there. But to spend that money now, when the densities aren't there, when the people aren't there in sufficient quantities, the quantity of people that need rapid transit on Shepherd, the right technology, the right tool is LRT, not subway. So it's a waste of money. If we spend the money, it'll be an incredible debt. But my hope is that council, that in the end has to decide this, will see that the math doesn't make sense.
I want to pick up on that point you raised right at the end, Councillor Mihevc, of the operating expense of running a subway. I've read different articles. I've seen people suggest that you need anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 trips per peak hour just to break even operating a subway. How long, in your opinion, is it going to take until we have a population density along the Shepherd corridor that can deliver those number of trips during peak hours to the subway?
Well, the studies that I've seen would suggest that you would start to get closer to the low end in about 2031. So 20 years before you would even come close, and that's just the beginning. Right now, they're anticipating that it's about 6,000 rides per hour that need to be accommodated, and that figure will be the same for will slowly increase over the next generation. I would predict at least 40 years before you see subway-type numbers along Shepherd Avenue. In the meantime, you could, in exchange for that $4.2 billion, boy, you could deliver all of Shepherd right to the far end. You could deliver Finch, and you'd still have money left over. It's just a shame that this is even being contemplated. And
Councillor, that leads me directly into my next question. You've touched on it in a number of ways, but if you take that transit city plan that had been proposed by the previous administration and compare and contrast it to the plan that Mayor Ford is now putting forward, who are the winners? Who are the losers here?
Yeah, very, very good question. The winners may be, and it's only by a few minutes, those people that live on Shepherd between Don Mills and Scarborough Town Centre, and the people on Shepherd who live between Yonge and Shepherd and Downsview and Shepherd subway stations. Those folks will be the winners. The losers will be anyone who lives, and this is 3/4 of Scarborough, who live east of the Scarborough Town Centre. All the people along Finch will be losers as well because they will not have LRT light rail available to them. And frankly, if it comes from property taxes, we will all be losing because we will be indebted for so long. The debt that the city will have to assume will be enormous. It will most certainly affect our credit ratings, and it will basically suck the life out of any other city building project that we might want to entertain.
Is there any credence? Sorry, is there any truth to when Rob Ford says that if he were to say that the people who drive are the winners? Just want to hear your perspective on that.
Well, if you provide the way the mayor likes to contrast TTC riders, bicyclists, and say they're part of the war on the car. If you support public transit, that it hurts people with cars. Mm-hmm. Even a slight modal shift, and that is getting some folks, instead of riding, let's say 30% on public transit, if they go up to 40% or 50%, so you're not asking people to get rid of their cars, and you recognize that cars are part of life in Toronto, but even if you get that modal shift over to public transit for a percentage of car riders, the car riders who need their vehicles for their business or for their groceries or because they're delivering children, they have more room on the car to get from A to B. Mm-hmm. Right now, we do not use the road very efficiently, but people say, well, I would use public transit if it was more efficient. Mm-hmm. And you know what? We've seen that to be true. That's what happened on Spadina Avenue. That's what happened on St. Clair. St. Clair ridership is up 25% because after all the craziness of the construction, it's done now, and people are riding along it with great efficiency. Right. And people vote with their feet. Yeah. And so guess what? Between 2005 and 2010, increased ridership on St. Clair is 25%, which means that when I need the car, as I'm going to in a few minutes to go out, and I have to go by car, I will have lots of room on the road because there's a lot more people taking public transit. Efficient public transit, and we know this when we have I guess they're outlawed now, but when we had TTC strikes, the whole city shut down. So the more that people are on public transit, they're really using the roadway in an efficient manner, and then those people who need cars have more room.
I imagine a lot of people might live out in Scarborough who, they can save a lot of money if they have easy access, but instead they have to take a car because there's no easy access to TTC that would fit their lifestyle.
Or they are stuck. Mm-hmm. Or they are stuck. And I don't think it's an accident. The places that need public transit most have the poorest public transit service. And that's what these lines were also meant to facilitate, them being part of and included in the City of Toronto. You're not part of the life of the city if it takes you 2-3 hours to get from Rexdale or Malvern into the downtown area. And of course, these areas are increasing in poverty. They're increasing in marginalization. Mm-hmm. And good public transit is not just about the economy. It's not just about the environment. It's also a way to include those folks in the life of the city. If you're not mobile, if you can't get there, you're stuck. you're stuck in the real physical sense of the word.
Well, Councillor, one last question, and thank you so much for being here. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you put the odds at that Council is going to ratify this new Mayor Ford and McGuinty transit plan that calls for $8.4 billion from the province, as we said, into Eglinton, and leaves the city on the hook for $4.2 billion to build its own subway? Do you think it's going to get through Council, or do you think it's not?
Well, really, I think that's going to be something that we will all as Torontonians need to be active on. The votes are so close. Every week or two I do a numbers count based on discussions, and the votes are close. Right now, the mayor is enjoying a honeymoon period. There's a number of new councillors, and somehow he has managed to pull them together enough to get what he wants through council. I think as time goes on, depending on when the vote is, it will be less and less likely as people start to unravel the craziness of the proposal that he has put forward. But certainly, the earlier he puts it on, the better chance he will have of doing it. That's why it's really important for every one of your listeners to become knowledgeable about what Transit City was about, what Transportation Toronto, the mayor's plan, is about. Compare them. Look at the Toronto Environmental Alliance, their website, ttcriders.ca website. Become knowledgeable, become active, make sure that your councillor votes the right way on this. It's going to be that close.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Councillor Mihevc. It was a real pleasure to have you here. And listeners, you got those websites, the Toronto Environmental Alliance, the TTC Riders, and what was the third website, Councillor Mihevc?
Did I say a third one?
I think it was just get in contact with your councillor.
Oh, yes, get in contact with your councillor. Very, very important. This is the time to let our voices be heard. We're already getting thousands, literally thousands of emails, and that's the kind of pressure that can tilt this.
And if you're not too familiar with how to contact your councillor, Toronto.ca. You can go right. Is it still Toronto.ca?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can go there, and now's the time to get involved.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Keep up the great work at CKLN.
Thank you. We thank you for the vote of confidence.
Thanks for your time.